It is Woden's Day. 'Tis here anyway. Over in the United States of America, a Mish article from whence we get petroleum and gasoline usage December, February, 3 months totals. But the chart is more than just there. It goes all the way back to 1992. For quick information, the petroleum is the blue one, which is stuff that you put in the car to make it go, and gasoline is the red one, which is heating oil, because this is the EIA and that's the way they do it. I've been to the EIA to try and check these figures, but I got a bit stuck. But you can see the general shape of it, and that's what's important about this chart. From 1992, as it says, it goes straight through the recession of 01-02 without stopping, up to 2005, and since then has been on the way down. There was a kink up in the red one, the gasoline, which is probably a bad winter for heating oil, but basically it's been on its way down. And we have gasoline, the heating oil, back to 0102 levels usage, and petroleum, gas in the car, back to 95, 96 levels. Now, the important thing is there that the usage went up of both through the 2000, 2001, 2002 recession. So something else new is happening, and I don't think it is at all economies in vehicles, as in vehicles being more economic. I think the people in America just aren't driving as much anymore or keeping their homes as warm as they used to. Right, America, have a look at this. Everyone have a look at this. Let's start with France, the second pair of columns. Now, we've got paired columns. The first column is 1990. The second column is 20 years later, 2010. So the first column of the French one, which is the third column in on this graph, has the dark level at 71%. Then above that is the grey. The 71% is tax. And the grey above is just money that goes to the petrol company and, Exxon, Shell, whoever it might be. Total in this case. So in 1990, France were paying 71% of, I was paying here in France, 71% of a gallon of gas equivalent was in tax. And that tax that I paid 20 years ago here in France was the equivalent of $4 a gallon American. 20 years ago I was paying $4 a gallon in tax at the pump 20 years ago. Okay, so now from that you've got an idea of how these go. The actual next pairing in France is 62%. The actual amount of tax percent of the gallon has gone down, but the price has gone up quite a bit, and this is 2010. I can tell you now it's nearer 8. So I'm paying $8 a barrel and probably about 60% in tax. Canada, you can see the overall rise is from $3 a barrel to nearer 4. Germany nearly doubled, 4, and they're at about $8 a barrel now. Japan's always been a bit expensive. The UK always been expensive, and their percentage of tax is probably the highest now, I think, in the world. There might be somewhere else, but generally, and they'll be at about 8. And look how easy the United States still gets it, with only, we know it's getting on for $4 a gallon at the pump, but the tax there is still only very, very small indeed compared to everywhere else in the world. Edward Harrison, number 3, gives us natural gas at 10-year lows as diesel hits retail records in Europe. Diesel prices here in Europe are at new record highs. I have a diesel car. Whatever happened to fuel switching between natural gas and diesel? I won't go into this. This is EIA again. And what we have actually in the United States is oil per BTU is about $20, $22, something like that. Natural gas is at about $3 for the BTU. Is it thousands of BTU? I don't know. But the comparison's right. 20 something for oil, 3 for gas, and 3 for coal. So the article referring to the EIA is saying, well, swap from diesel trucks to gas trucks. It'll be an awful lot cheaper, but as I've said in the past, as soon as you get there and you swap over your fleet to gas, then the gas prices, because of the extra demand and the initial whoosh of gas coming out of the ground, will go down. There'll be more demand and the price will rocket up again, probably up to the same price as oil or diesel or wherever it was. So it's a very tricky problem. Financial Times gives us US rush to gas depresses coal prices. The share of electricity generated by burning coal in the US has fallen to a near 35-year low as utilities shift to cheaper gas on the back of shale revolution. This gas, this new thing, new way of doing it, and they're all doing it, so there's an initial rush of gas. And that's the way it comes out of the ground, in an initial rush. And then it gets trickier and trickier. The shift is reverberating beyond the US as domestic coal miners are forced to export a growing share of their production. It is creating a global glut that is depressing prices in the almost $100 billion a year thermal coal seaborne market. Over in the United States, Exxon say they are to spend $150 billion over 5 years to find oil and gas. This is the sort of number that was needed. New York, Exxon said Thursday that it will spend, well, no need to repeat it. They are going to do their bit and spend what is necessary. But there are very few other players that are willing to spend, percentage-wise, that sort of money. Grigor, using EIA data, has given us this: the OECD petroleum consumption in millions of barrels a day, 2002 to 2011. OECD, us wonderful Western world. And as you can see, it's very similar to the US petroleum and gasoline use. Goes up to a maximum in 2005 and has been on a downer ever since. So, who's using it all? Number 7, China, percentage of world share of stuff, 2000 in grey, 2010 in red. Iron ore, the first on the left there. China was using 14% of the world's share of iron ore, now it's 61%. Coal, no percent, they used their own. So are these imports? No, it was right down there. World share was 0.3% coal, now it's 14. Copper, 12 up to 28. Oil consumption, 6 to 10.6. I think it's 12 now, so that's doubled. Power generation was 9 and now it's 20. Container usage, 18 to 30. Soya beans, 23% of the world share, is now nearer 60. Number 8 is crude oil imports of metric tons, but you get the idea from the bottom left, top right general trend of China's oil imports. Number 9, the number of registered automobiles increased 16.4% in 2011 to 106 million. Where? China. There were 105,780,000 automobiles registered in China for civilian use at the end of 2011, 16.4 more than a year ago. And I've gone down to the bottom there with 2011 marks the first year in history where more automobiles than motorcycles were allowed on the Chinese roads. More automobiles than motorcycles. And then we get a complete shift with Bloomberg. Iran, oil, power declining as explorers increase spending, energy. And it's one of these strange kind of almost Sarah type don't worry, be happy oil articles. I'll read you the first 3 paragraphs. The Iran-driven run-up in oil prices. There we get our first bit. The run-up in oil prices has been due to Iran. The Iran-driven oil prices to their highest since 2008 masks the Middle East producers' diminishing importance to global oil supplies as record spending on drilling unearths reserves from Argentina to Angola. And you know that's a rubbish article when they go reserves from Argentina to Angola. They're talking about reserves again, which we always say. You never talk about reserves, the stock. What you want to talk about is the available flow. And it's Argentina to Angola. At least you should write Argentina to Zambia or Angola to Zambia. Anyway, new fields will ease pressure on prices. Jolly good. According to the Centre for Global Energy Studies, I looked them up last time, they looked a bit dodgy. Futures show investors expect benchmark crude to drop to less than $100 a barrel in 2015 from $125 today. I won't go into that, but that's dodgy as well. Global exploration spending led by Exxon and Shell will jump 20% this year to at least 90 billion, Barclays says. It is absolutely needed, and that is not just the minimum, that is well below the minimum that the IEA says should be. Offshore drilling may unlock about 25 billion barrels of oil this year, more than 4 times Norway's remaining reserves, according to Morgan Stanley. In addition, there are so-called unconventional fields in the US where oil production from North Dakota shale rose 75% last year. Again, it's a dodgy stat. When you're starting something, the initial ramp-up is always more. So it's not surprised it's 75% more because they're ramping up now. But everyone knows that that initial ramp-up will soon go whoop. And Argentina, home to a field found by Repsol that may hold about 23 billion barrels. So they're talking about finding new fields. So everything will be all right. But it's like we started now or last year to look for new fields. They were looking for new fields the year before, 3 years before that, 5 years before that, and 10 years before that. So were they not finding all these fields then, and should they not all be coming online now to give us not stock but flow? Seemingly not, because the price is over $100 a barrel. And if you really want to understand the balancing out of that stupid article by Bloomberg, go to Grigor, writing for Chris Martenson now. Understanding the new price of oil, and it's well worth reading the whole article. And signing up for Chris Martenson to read more of these sort of articles. I'll give you the first few paragraphs. In the spring of 2011, when Libyan oil production over 1 million barrels a day was suddenly taken offline, the world received its first real-time test of global pricing system for oil since the crash lows of 2009. Oil prices already at $85 level for WTI bolted above $100 and eventually hit near 115. More importantly, however, is that, save for a brief 8-week period in the autumn, oil prices have stubbornly remained over $85 a barrel pre-Libya level ever since. Even the debt crisis in Europe has flared, hasn't brought the price down. As usual, the mainstream view on the world's ability to make up for the loss has been wrong. How could the removal of only 1.3% of total global production affect oil prices in any prolonged way, they say, was the universal view of the experts. And read the article, please, but one of the main drives that Grigor, wonderful Grigor, comes out with, non-OPEC do not have any spare capacity. In OPEC, realistically, only Saudi Arabia has spare capacity. We have noticed since the Arab Spring that it took Saudi Arabia about 6 months to bring half a million barrels of spare capacity online. And that didn't really affect the price very much, but it came online. But, and this is the big but, when it came online, the oil market seemed to go, that took an awfully jolly long time to come online. And now, and this is the important thing, and now, where is the spare capacity? In other words, they were almost happier when Saudi Arabia had not brought a little bit of spare capacity into the market, because now they're sitting there and looking, shit, there is now probably no spare capacity at all. Any price shock now, and the price must, any supply shock, the price must go through the roof. In other words, it showed Saudi Arabia come to the end of its limit, and when Saudi was at the end of its limit, the world was pumping at max. So any supply shock would be automatically a price shock, and that worried the market more than Saudi Arabia not bringing the spare capacity on. And this obviously will always happen from now on in until these marvellous Bloomberg stocks of oil become flows of oil. Finishing in the UK, high gas prices hasten UK energy crunch. Britain is heading towards an energy supply crunch sooner than expected, as many of the country's coal-fired power stations face early closure under European Union environmental regulations. So they've got to shut down the coal and go over to gas, with 8 coal-fired plants that are due to close by 2015 as part of efforts to cut harmful emissions by several are set to shut before then, as companies rapidly burn through their remaining EU production allowances. So they've got to go over to gas, where there's a glut of it over the Atlantic in the United States, but it's bloody expensive to get it in from Holland and Russia. These world balancing of energies are being more and more and more vital to everybody, and they're just struggling to get it right. And I don't think they can now, because there's just not enough to have the spare here so it can go there. Everybody's tight except the United States and its gas and its spare coal now, because people don't want to use it. It's just terribly difficult, and it's actually getting through to the mainstream media as important now. I'm seeing a lot more articles on is energy causing this, is oil price causing that, and what are we going to do? So many people calling for what do they call it? An energy policy. That's it, an energy policy. But they won't get it again because it's too difficult. Politicians have to come up with energy policies, and the only things that politicians have come up with are environmental regulations, which might help save the world in a couple of 100 years' time, but the world is going to struggle to get to 200 years' time. That's enough. Woden's Day out.